Mr. Fred Johnson, I believe is his name. Fred, thank you so much for joining us today. Truly appreciate it. I know this isn't a great day. I thought you did a fantastic job. We all thought you did a fantastic job with the case. So first and foremost, I want to get your reaction to the verdict. I know you argued against a conviction here, certainly against the intent. So correct me if I'm wrong. There was an open murder charge. There were felony murder charges based on the first-degree child abuse. Does that mean the jury rejected first-degree, second-degree murder by finding felony murder? Explain to me how that worked.
Okay. First of all, I would disagree with your characterization that this wasn't a great day. This was a great day. The object here is this isn't a baseball game. It's not winning or losing. It's if justice gets done. And I think justice, the system worked, and her peers have spoken, and justice was done. But more directly to your question, the question that you've asked is more. Oops, I'm sorry. The question that you've asked is more of a technicality than anything else. All those, the different degrees of first-degree murder, whether it's first-degree or felony murder or whatever, they all end up meaning the same thing. They're different reasons why we call them different things, but in the end of the day, they all carry the exact same sentence. They all mean the exact same thing. So don't worry about yourself over whether it's felony murder or just first-degree murder. The bottom line is there is one sentence for it, and that's life in prison, and that's what will happen with my client.
And Mr. Johnson, one of the things that I talked about yesterday on our show was my admiration for the professionalism of all of the attorneys, yourself included, with such a bad set of facts. Because sometimes attorneys, I used to be on the bench, they would get caught up in the bad facts and then they would take it personally and they would really get a little bit unprofessional. But I must ask you, is this one of the worst cases factually in which you've represented a defendant, and how did you handle that piece, if so?
Okay, I passed the bar in 1986. This is the worst case I've ever handled. It's not even, I've handled cases with serial murders. This is the worst case I've ever handled. You do your job. The facts were terrible. The outcomes were worse. You do your job. You come in there, and your job is to represent this woman and to press for her point of view, and that's what you do. If you do that, and the prosecutor does that, and the jury does their end, and the judge does his end, justice gets done in the end, and that's the objective. Now comes the time when you have to sleep after the end. I mean, once you do all the intellectual stuff, the emotionality of it kicks in, and you got to sit down and you got to sleep with these facts and those images that are forever in my mind. So that's difficult. But you know, the way I handle it is through my faith. I'm a Christian. And so that's how I handle it. But other people do it in other different ways. But the way we keep it professional is because we've taken an oath and we believe in the system that we're working in. And we're going to make it work, and we're going to make the right thing happen regardless of the outcome, and accept the outcome if the jury has done the right thing.
Yeah, fair enough. And I always tell people, you know, we're defending the Constitution as well as a client. So that's important to remember. What can you tell us about today and Shanda not wanting to or not being able to be in the courtroom for what went on earlier today, the rebuttal witness as well as the verdict?
Okay. What happened this morning is I came in to see my client. I'm sorry, I keep messing with this earpiece. I came in to see my client, and she was in a catatonic state. She's having some emotional and mental difficulties with this entire process, with the entire thing for 18 months. That's who she is. That's who she's been consistent. She was not able to be brought up today, and we sat and we talked and we discussed that it would be better if she just remained where she were and to remain not sedated, but in a situation where she wasn't required to receive much input, and I would run back and forth with her and let her know what's going on. But that was a decision by myself and my client after, and she made the decision based on my recommendations and my explanation to her of her options.
Let me ask you, Mr. Johnson, how was the decision made by her, we know it's a client's right, to testify or not, to testify in this case?
A lot of things go into that decision. A lot of times they aren't made until the day of trial, and you see what's coming in and what isn't coming in, that sort of thing, whatever your strategy. Trials don't happen just just because we don't get here without a plan, and it's strategy-based. In this situation, there were things I needed to get in front of the jury. Then I had only one witness who could deliver them, and that was my client. And given the consequences of a guilty verdict, I'll be honest with you, she had nothing to lose by taking the stand. She needed to take the stand to defend herself. She needed to take the stand to get these facts in before the jury. And quite frankly, given the gravity of the situation, my preference, quite frankly, is to allow the person to get up there and tell their piece. She doesn't think she's guilty of this offense. She should, given that what she might be facing, what she is facing now, she should have the opportunity to look a jury in the eye and say, look, I didn't do it like they say I did it.
So that's what I was going to ask you.
So part of it was strategic. Yeah, part of it was strategic. The other part was personal. If you're looking at spending your life in prison, you should at least get a chance to get up and say, I didn't do this.
Yeah, it's always difficult. It's always a very difficult decision. And part of what I was going to ask you is, obviously it seemed to me during her time on the stand that certainly she didn't believe she did this, but certainly did she believe at all that she was guilty of anything? Because I couldn't even connect on that level with her as well, that anything that she did was wrong, that this was just disciplining someone who needed discipline and nothing more. At least that's the sense I got from her.
Okay. One of the charges, one of the lesser included offenses that the jury could have considered was something called involuntary manslaughter. And in that is for the purpose of this discussion is, yes, a death occurred, but I didn't intend to do it. The intent issue is where she disagrees. It's not. She testified that she didn't remember a lot of things, but she testified she remembered others. But it was never her intent to harm this child. Her testimony was, and her discussion with me has been consistent from the very beginning, and that is that I only disciplined my child to the point necessary to achieve the certain goals that I was trying to achieve. And one was to get him so he wouldn't be dishonest with me. The other was to get him so he would be take care of his schooling and just the appropriate things that you expect from a parent.
Now, we know the sentencing has been set by the court in this case for January 29th at 8:30 a.m. We know that the pre-sentencing report is going to happen. What else do you expect, if anything, to present by the defense in the sentencing phase of this case?
We want to reiterate the positives of the sentencing. Now, let's be honest. There is no mystery of the sentence. In Michigan, there's only one sentence for what she's been convicted of, and that's life in prison without the possibility of parole. However, we want to put the best light on the record for her so that if ever there's a change in the law or if ever she reaches for a pardon or something to that effect, this material is recorded. She has achieved a lot given the burdens that she's carried. I mean, she came up from poverty. She was in a situation where her family was abusive to her. She was in a situation of bad relationships where her husband's been abusive. She's been left and abandoned on her own to raise children, and yet she's achieved such high academic success and working for judges and doing some really positive things with her life. And that should be part of the record too. We want a whole person representation of her with this judge and for the record.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that with us, Mr. Johnson. Those will answer a lot of the questions that we had about her as well. And I'll let you go on this. But obviously, I guess she was a brilliant legal mind, someone who wanted to go into the appellate realm. How was that relationship working with her? Was she very much involved in her defense, or how did that work?
She was very much involved in her defense. It was like I had a lawyer for a client. And if I had an idea, I'd run it by her. She had one, she'd run it by me. You may have seen a lot of that working, especially during the selection of a jury. That was very much a joint process between the two of us. But yes, she's a trained attorney. So yes, she worked very, very closely with me and the rest of the team in creating and devising and the strategy for her defense. So she was very much involved, yes.
All right.
And my expectation, she'll be involved with her appeal.
And clearly a very smart woman. I didn't mean to interrupt. Did you have any other
questions? I was just going to give him the opportunity to say if there was anything. We're done now. We're going to let you go. But if there's any last words or anything you would want our audience to know about her, about this case or anything, I'll give the opportunity now.
Well, your audience has watched the case. And the facts and circumstances are terrible. And what happened to that young man shouldn't happen to any human being. That was just horrible. The word I use is horrific. I still stand by that. But I'm hoping that in our quieter times we remember that none of us want to be remembered for the worst thing we've ever done. That there's another whole person out there, there's another set of circumstances, and that everybody should be considered for those things, and that forgiveness is required of us. Forgiveness is required of us. And so, at the end of the day, Ms. Vander Ark has a new path she's going to have to walk, and we'll go forward, and we'll mourn for Timothy, quite frankly, this will serve as maybe a beacon. Maybe there's somebody out there right now who's watching this program who's working under very difficult circumstances and needs to cry for help. And maybe this will encourage them to pick up that phone and say, look, I need some help. Things aren't working out well.